Hello, hello. It is October 16th, 2024. Yesterday was Tuesday, so today is Wednesday. And I'm going to go over some more of the League games that we played last night. I will note, as an update to the double round robin Blitz tournament, I finally did get the my first Blitz rating, which is actually 1142. And I'll bring this up here. Yeah, here's the cross table for the event. You can see I tied for second place with 7 out of 10. Tied with Anthony, who ran the whole thing. And here you'll see my initial rating is 1142. It says P10 there. I think my guess is that P10 means provisional out of 10 games. Or after 10 games, this is your ranking, but it's still provisional. But, whatever. So yeah, this was the score sheet, or I don't know what they call this, cross table. Yeah, cross table. And there's actually an error in the table right here. So I assume this B and the W here means black and white. I was supposed to be white here on round, or sorry, not there, here, round 6, because I played against John. But you can see here round 1 was a win against player 4, and I was playing black, which is, I think, was correct. No, well, no, this should be white. This one should be white. Yeah. Oh well, doesn't matter. The win losses are still correct, so this is still correct. So this is still correct. Okay, so getting into the actual league games, I got in and Anthony said, "You play hit." No, I'm kidding. But Emmanuel was there. He was kind of sitting waiting for a game because Anthony and I forgot who he was playing when I came in, but they were already in a game. But so Anthony was like, "Oh, do you guys want to play?" And I was like, "Of course, hell yeah, let's go." So all right, let's finally get into this. D4 D5. So again, I'm trying to play a Catalan, and I'm doing it in this knight f3 move order. It's supposed to be easier to learn because, if I go c4 immediately, I have to learn Queen's Gambit accepted, Queen's Gambit declined, which is probably the most common, but, I have to learn, I don't know, maybe this is a move, Marshall defense, maybe this, and then if I keep going, maybe I have to learn a Bogo Indian or something, but yeah, so from the book I'm using, which is like keeping it simple 1d4 by Christian Selecki, I think his name. He recommends just go d4 knight f3 and then play from there. So finally we get this position here, we have the bishop g4 line with the normal Catalan setup. Except I haven't castled yet, and I totally could, and I do. But here, here's another example of not quite remembering the plans. Well, okay, no, that's not true. I did remember the plan. I want to go queen. I want to go queen b3, knight c3, and try to pressure here. But I was concerned about my d4 pawn because he can easily take here. So if I move, if I go queen b3, my concern was take. I guess queen b7 is still hanging. But I would assume he would do this. d4. Yeah, I didn't like this too much. Well, now that I see it, I don't like it either. So, yeah, that's what I was concerned about the entire game. But I guess it's somewhat fine. Anyway, he continues with knight f6. Pretty normal development. My plan here is to try to push e4, but it's a little tricky because this d4 pawn is a little loose. I continued with e3, which is not the way to go. It's a little slow, even though it does defend the d4 pawn. But, if it's better to try to play e4 in one fell swoop and try to defend the pawn another way. I just couldn't find that way, unfortunately. So, bishop e7, knight d2, or knight bd2. It does defend the pawn, which I'm not totally concerned about losing, but I just know that this is one of the typical plans. However, I should have I forgot that knight c3 is the way to go in these lines where the bishop is out past this little pawn chain here is black. He plays knight e4, which I thought was kind of interesting. You know, I didn't really know how good of a trade it would be for me, so I played a normal Catalan move, which is queen c2. You know, in a lot of lines, the queen lands here to help support e4, but in this situation, the computer actually recommends either b3 or a4. b3 is more in line with what I remembered because it pressures b7, but I just couldn't remember this in the game yesterday, so, you know, this is just one of the one of the things and one of the problems with the opening I chose to learn for whatever reason. You know, there's so many different plans in the position based on the various amount of ways that black can set up. I'm definitely punching a little above my weight here with this opening, but I'm just gonna stick to it. I think I'm capable of getting it all down. It's just we have to get there. So he castles. I play b3, just solidifying this pawn. And again, my whole plan is to try to play e4, but it's a little tricky with how my pieces are. He goes bishop f5 to attack my queen, so I just move out of the way. He plays a6. I'm not sure what a6 was trying to do, because I'm definitely not coming in. Well, I'm definitely not coming in this way because of his bishop. And it's not like I have a piece that jumps into this area here anymore. So a5, if he's going to push his a pawn, I would have assumed a5, because it also supports a knight going to b4, which I was concerned about this game. So rook e1, again, trying to play e4. Rook c8. Here, I played a weird move, knight h4, which was actually a mistake, because he can totally just take here and be up a pawn, but he didn't see it, right? He just saw the knight attacking his bishop and wanted to move the bishop, which is, you know, what I wanted to do. I wanted to trade it off, but he plays bishop h7. And then I realized after I moved my knight there that this attack is real, so I had to move my knight back. So rook e8, bishop c3. Again, I'm trying to defend this pawn, potentially to a fault, and play e4. I remember thinking I wanted to play knight d2, e4, because it would be supported 3 times, but he only has 1 defender on this square, so I could totally push e4 right now. So he plays bishop f6, which is fine. I'm over defending this pawn. Again, I'm a little too concerned about this pawn. I should really be trying to just push e4 right away. And then he plays a weird move to me, rook e7. And I remember reading the book, and it's one of the ideas was that if a bishop and a queen, or if a bishop's on f6 and a queen lands on e7, you can go for h4, knight h2 to g4 to capture on f6. And it kind of relieves a lot of problems for white. So I went for it, and yeah, that's not a queen there, but I figured the idea is the same. The bishop can't move, and I'm going to try to trade it off. He goes bishop e4. I think he was just trying to trade off my bishop if I was going to go for this maneuver. And I know in the Catalan, you don't want to trade off your Catalan bishop unless you're really getting something out of it. But I figured, okay, I'll at least have a bishop on the board, and maybe it'll be better in the endgame. Yeah, the position is closed, but I can always try to open it with moves like cd5, ed5, e4, break here, something like that. And then I can also try to push queenside pawns. So I go for it, knight h2, trade on g2, and then he pushes e5. I didn't really think this was what he wanted, because this is still defended. I guess you could try to create a locked structure, but I'm going to start working towards bringing my bishop out this way, so it's not totally like shutting my bishop in. But I continue with my plan of trying to trade off the bishop. He goes queen d6, I take, and he trades it off. And now I take on e5. So I don't actually have enough defenders, right? So 1, 2, 3 versus 1, 2. So it doesn't actually quite work, or like this pawn is going to be an even pawn trade. But I noticed in this position there's a small tactic where if he takes with the knight, So, okay, so first of all, he's not going to take with the rook. He's not going to take with the queen. He's going to take with the knight. If he does take with the knight, which is what he did in the game, I saw that I had this move f4. I realized I was talking over my microphone, and I realized I was talking behind my microphone, so hopefully it still sounds fine. So I thought I had f4 in this position, pinning. His knight is pinned, and I'm attacking it with a pawn that you can't really get rid of. Neither of us saw the computer's recommendation here, d4, because after fe, there's queen c6, and then you take here, and now I'm not there. But now this position, even though I'm up a pawn, I have a set of doubled isolated pawns, which is really difficult to defend. I can't really defend this further up pawn, a move as simple as rook e8. And I'm not defending this. And then once he does take it, so let's just say, I don't know. Right, once I do defend the pawn, he can just add pressure to this and start pushing these pawns to try to weaken my my king. So we both missed this d4 move. So spoiler. So after f4, he played knight d3, trying to counterattack my queen. But I was looking at the capture chain that was going to happen, which is what happened in the game. And I realized this is better for me because I take his rook. And now he can't take my rooks, obviously, because that's not how the knight moves. So he has to spend a move either attacking my bishop or like not taking a rook, to put it simply. So he plays rook e8. I bring my bishop back to a3. Knight d3, get my rook out of the way, so rook e d1. He takes a pawn, which I totally forgot was hanging. I could have played something like this to not lose a pawn. But he takes, I take this pawn back. And here, after he played b5, I kind of realized that my position is like ever so slightly cramped. Like my rook can only go to b1 right now, and even if it does go to b1, I can't even move it up because it's blocked. So I got to figure out how to untangle here. And I decided to try to do that with d6. If he pushes, I'm gonna keep pushing my pawn, and he's gotta, try to defend it, which I don't think you can. Yeah, once I get to d7, it's like you kind of have to. I don't even know what you do here. King h7, rook e2. Yeah, I mean nothing works. So he had to take. I take back. f6. Never play f6. I mean it's fine here. It doesn't really matter all too much. I played a4, which is a little less accurate, but to me made a lot of sense. It's going to free up my rook to actually swing over this way to actually get into the game. Trade on a4, he plays a5, and I finally get to move my rook, and now I'm double attacking his knight. Or I have two attackers on the knight, and he can't defend it, right? He just doesn't have another piece. And I just wanted to make sure there's no random knight forks or discoveries, right? There's this check, but that would be fine. Yeah, knight e1 here, there. This is still totally fine for me. It's not quite as good, but yeah, wouldn't work. King f7, and I finally win his knight, and he keeps playing on, trying to get some counterplay, but there's nothing here. And at this point, he actually ran out of time. I think I had like 30 seconds left, but he eventually flagged, but this position was most definitely lost. So a nice win for me after losing to him twice back in September, which I think this is the most recent. That was the last time I played him actually, back in September. So pretty cool win. Going into game number 2 against Emmanuel, I have the black pieces, and he starts with c4, which is quite a surprise to me. I thought he played d4 last time, or maybe he played, I don't remember, but I was not expecting him to play c4. So I try to go into the one system that I know against the English, which turns into a queen's pawn opening. And I remember trying to go into a great snake against the English, but that's only really a thing if he goes knight f3 and doesn't play d4. So in my mind, I thought I was still playing a great snake, but then I pushed f5, and here I was like, oh, wait a second. what am I doing? Why did I push my f pawn? Now, it's not too bad, but it's a little bad. So this structure resembles a Leningrad Dutch. And if you recall, I do play a Dutch setup, but I play a classical Dutch setup where the pawns are on d7, e6, and f5, rather than having the pawns on g6. So basically the pawn's on g6 instead of the pawn being pushed on e6. And I know there are slight differences. I just didn't remember what they are. Well, I mean, I guess the one obvious difference is that my bishop is fianchettoed here. So, you know, maybe I should have played for like c5 or something. But I realized after I pushed f5, like, oh, wait, we're not going into the opening I thought we were. So now I'm just randomly playing a Leningrad Dutch. And I had to just figure it out from here. So we continue with normal developing moves. In the classical, I know that you can fianchetto the light squared bishop if they do not do so themselves. So that's what I did. You know, he played bishop e3, bishop d3. So it's like, okay, I can fianchetto my bishop at least. And, you know, I figured maybe the plans are still the same because you still have the f pawn here. I can still fianchetto and try to put a knight on e4. Maybe my other knight does still want to come this way. But yeah, so I immediately plopped my knight into e4, but it was way too early to do that. In my mind, I calculated knight takes doesn't work because I'll have a fork and it's protected by my bishop. So like, oh great, I can play knight e4. But for some reason, I just didn't think that he could play bishop takes. And now if I take with the pawn, I attack his knight, I guess. But you know, that's not exactly what I was hoping for. But that is what he did. He takes on e4 with a bishop. I take back with the pawn, and he retreats his knight. And now I'm just going to lose this pawn here because I cannot add another defender. I could try to go d5, but I didn't like takes. And I mean, I could do this, I guess, but this just... Apparently this is not so bad, but I didn't really like it. So he takes the pawn, and I was just like, okay, whatever, I'll just play down a pawn. So knight c6, bishop d2, and a6. So from here, we're kind of just jostling around. I'm trying to put a knight on f5 because I figured it's a nice outpost. He's not going to be able to push e4, and g4 looks a little incredulous right now, so I'll be fine. He's getting queenside space. You know, my pawns are pretty passive, but I'm trying to use like long diagonals and a little bit of maneuvering to figure out how to like get something going. I play queen a4 just to attack his knight, but also vaguely pressure the king side. I know maybe there's some tactic here where I can bring my queen back to g5 and just mate, but he plays knight g3. I decide to take for whatever reason. I thought I was trying to open up his king, but as it turns out, this is actually not the way to go. I have to move my queen back to f6. He defends the f2 pawn, and here I try to go for an interesting tactic. Okay, so I played a5 because I noticed that his queen and his rook were aligned on this diagonal, and I wanted to put a bishop here. The other problem was that, you know, this pawn's in the way, so I wanted to find somehow, I wanted to find a way to get rid of this pawn or at least move it. A5 basically puts, allows the bishop to go to a6 to, you know, point on this diagonal while being protected by the rook. So that's what I was trying to go for. But he smartly plays knight b5, kind of blocking the diagonal and also attacking the c7 pawn. I play c6, which apparently is a pretty big mistake because of knight d6. However, I don't know. I just played, for some reason, I just played bishop a6 anyway. I mean, nothing's under attack, but at the same time, this knight is really annoying. So I got to find a way to trade it off. He plays b5, cb5, cb5, and I'm quickly realizing that I'm not going to be able to use this diagonal because his knight is protecting it, his queen is protecting it, the rook is protected. So I got to find another plan. I bring my bishop back just because, well, I mean, it's under attack, of course, and that's the only square. He plays a5, so now that plan is really never coming back for quite a while. I continue with queen e7. Just to try to kick his knight out, he plays e4, knight e4. And now my bishop can actually go onto the diagonal, or a diagonal that is active rather than being behind a pawn. So as we keep developing, we're both running low on time. I think he's down to like a minute at this point, and I still have like maybe a minute and a half. It's a lot of just shuffling and trying to find plans. I'm trying to break through in the center just to open up this bishop, and also because when I did kick his knight out with the d pawn, I blocked my own bishop in. So I'm trying to open this up. So he takes, I take back with the bishop. Knight d5 apparently is super strong. But, we didn't see that. Oh, well, okay, actually he did take. I remember he did take, and then I tried I tried getting sneaky with queen g5. I figured maybe there's something. But also just because there wasn't really a better square for my queen, I didn't think. E4, queen d8, f4, kicking my bishop away. And this position is supposed to be really bad, but, he's up 2 pawns. His knight is pretty decently placed in the center, but I figured this is still a game. I have, at least I have the bishop pair, so maybe I can try to get something going. But unfortunately, time gets the better of him. He plays rook c2, and he's about to flag here, so I kind of just play moves. I take on d5, which apparently is a big mistake. Yeah, because you can deflect my queen from the protection of the bishop here. But he takes the bishop right away. I take his rook. He takes back. And at this point, he runs out of time, and I sneak away with another win here. But yeah, we both missed a lot of tactics that he had. At this point here, it's +3. And he did play like b5, and computer recommends queen e7 or bishop c8. Or sorry, that's my move. Bishop c1 is a move, which I don't. Okay, sure. I guess maybe you're trying to go this way. But yeah, it's like +2.5 here. And as we continue over, we both missed the idea that rook c8 is a very strong move, especially here, right? Bishop e3, queen c3. Yeah, I guess it's not so obvious that this is +3, because I guess if you count pawns, he's up 2 pawns. And I guess my king is a little exposed, but I didn't think this was too bad of a position to hold. But, obviously the computer sees all, so I get a lucky win there. He runs out of time. But I was definitely worse for most of the game, because I wouldn't say because, but partially because I played this Leningrad f5 with the fianchetto, and I wasn't really sure what I was doing the entire game. Okay, going on to the third game of the day I played in total. These next 3 games are going to be against Wayne, who is a very strong player. I remember my first encounter with him, we went 1-1, and I know way back in the day, he used to play a lot of chess and play a lot of FIDE tournaments. So, he's a good player. He's a very strong player. I know for a fact that I can, go against him, and we can have good games as long as I am a little sharp. Assuming I'm not just blundering free pieces in 10 moves, I think I can do well against him. So this is going to be the first game against him. All right. He is a d4 player. I play knight f6. I'm trying to, again, play into my new openings. I am hoping he would go into a normal queen's pawn opening with c4, but he plays knight f3. As much as I want this on the board, they're not obliged to play c4 and move 2, as is the case in the game. So I figured, okay, like what do I do now? That's something I have to figure out. So over the board, I was just like, all right, screw it. I'm gonna play a King's Indian and hope for the best. So I played G6. Now he plays C4, which now doesn't let me go into the, I can't play the Knight's Tango now because after D5, my Knight doesn't really have a good square. I don't really want to go to B4. It's gonna keep getting kicked around and probably go to like A6 or something. And this just looks bad. And I'm definitely not going to B8. Even though computer says knight b8 is one of the best moves, is the second best move, I am not doing that. I refuse. So no Knight's Tango. Even though we have d4, c4 on the board, it has to be on the second move that c4 is played. Anyway, continuing with very generic King's Indian stuff. Bishop g7, bishop f4, d6, knight c3, knight d7, or knight b d7. I'm not exactly sure if the knight is supposed to go here or if it's supposed to go here. I figured d5 is always a move, so if I put my knight on c6, d5, and I have the same problem as I described before, so knight d7. Queen c2, kind of an interesting move. I didn't really know what he was trying to get at with this. I thought he was trying a queenside castle, to which, I'm pretty okay with that. I can always try to play on the queen side if he does want a castle there. I play c5 to break the center. Obviously, e5 isn't really going to work because he's got 3 defenders on the square, and I only have 2 defenders for myself. C5 also does try to break open a center since he's not castled quite yet. I mean, he can very easily just castle queenside, and it's fine for him, but I wanted to see if he would, waste time or something like that. So he plays e3, kind of solidifying everything, and I continue with a6. Again, I'm ready for him to castle queenside, and I'm starting to prepare my own attack on that side of the board if he does want to castle queenside. So I played a6, and he continues with a4, trying to grab space on the queen side. Also, with this move, that kind of tells me that you are not castling queenside, just because this is a bit of a weakness, especially once the rook moves over to the square here. Yeah, the queen defends it, but the queen isn't always the best defender of things. So I figured, okay, you're not castling queenside. I can safely castle kingside and kind of just play a closed structure, or what you'll see in the game. Bishop d3, b6. I'm just trying to slowly get all of my pieces into a good spot before I try to break the center. I wanted to play cd4, ed4, but he plays d5. So now I'm thinking, okay, he's trying to close it down. e5 is really hard to play because he has en passant. So I played knight h5 first, trying to trade off the bishop. Right, his bishop doesn't really have any good squares. g5, h6, and he's got to go this way, to which I could even continue playing with so for example, g5, and now I have g4, and you could go there. You might even be able to play knight h4, but I figured I can go oh, that doesn't work. Okay, so maybe not f5 right away. Maybe something what does computer say? Knight g3. So I could take here, but yeah, I was thinking just trying to break this up and try to get a kingside attack. But yeah, clearly it doesn't work right now. But that was totally ready for that. He does play bishop g3 though, so take. Knight e5, just kind of getting my knight onto a better square. He plays b3 to kind of solidify everything. This is kind of hard to attack considering all the pawns are in the way. I do end up trading his knight, and I figured this pawn structure looks a little odd. If I can target this pawn or try to get something like e6, or sorry, if I can somehow get my queen to h3, maybe I can do something. But yeah, I start with queen d7 with the idea of queen h3. He plays king g2 to stop that, and I play e6 to try to pry apart the center and open up my bishop here. E4, good move to kind of close it all down. Trade on d5, and I play rook a e1. This rook isn't really doing anything here, right? These pawns are looking at each other, so it's fine. I'll just leave them alone. and I grab the open file. He also brings his rook to the e file, and apparently bishop c8 is minus 1.4. I couldn't. Well, I guess I could explain why, right? Because you're trying to just like get into this king side here, and maybe something can happen. But I didn't see anything past. So let's just say white to move. White breaks random move. I saw this, but I didn't see quite the follow up. Rook e5. Oh. And if you don't move your queen, rook h1 is also a move. But then I take this way and go there. Okay. So anyway, I played b5 because I didn't see the idea of this being actually that good. Couple of trades. I misevaluated this trade here for some reason. So I thought I could do after knight b5. I thought I had bishop takes d5, pawn takes d5, queen takes b5, but totally forgot the bishop is still covering that. So I made a bit of a mistake here, but it's not the end of the world. It's still just one pawn. One pawn, it's a disadvantage, but at lower levels, it doesn't mean as much. It's hard to convert a one pawn advantage in general, but I continue with rook a8. I figured, okay, maybe in the future I have ideas of playing rook a1 just because my bishop stares through like the entire board. He plays rook e2, and I figured, okay, he's trying to double up on the e file. Let me try to contest that. He doubles, and here I actually take his rook, and to my surprise, he takes with the other rook. Now I play bishop c8 because now I figured it's a little stronger. I don't know why I didn't think it was strong back then, but now I figured this might be a good plan. G4 is a good move to kind of stop it all. And now I'm trying to abuse the other diagonal to try to get in here. But again, he plays a good move, king g4, to stop that. And now I finally play rook a1. Now in the game, I figured I had rook g1. King h2 doesn't quite work because of queen h4. And maybe I'm getting in. But I also saw queen h3, king h3, and then I didn't really know what to do from there. So continuing on with the game, he plays f4, and now rook g1 is strong. I do play it, king f3, but I couldn't find the proper follow-up for the rest of this. I did see bishop g4, and then I saw this check, but computer's, computer knows all, of course. Queen f6 was the move, but I kept giving checks. I made this exchange because I thought his king was going to be a little, trapped in the center of the board. I thought I had something here with queen f6, but I looked at it, and I should also mention I'm like about a minute left on the clock, so I'm really trying to figure out where my attack is. I saw queen f6, king e3, but then I didn't see a move after that. So I was like, okay, I don't see an attack. Let me take his rook. And I remember thinking a lot of conflicting thoughts at this very moment. I saw, okay, I don't see an attack, so I'm just going to take his rook. And then as my brain told my hand to move for the bishop and grab the rook, I was like, I can't take this rook because I'm probably not going to have an attack, and I don't have time to convert this endgame. But my body just kept going and took the rook and then hit the clock, and I immediately after I hit the clock, I was like, I don't have time to win this endgame. I only had about 40 seconds on the clock at this point. So he takes back with the bishop. Yeah, I only had 40 seconds on the clock. I don't know why. I figured if I'm going to lose on time, I may as well try to get a checkmate and lose on time because I don't have a checkmate, or if, maybe I just don't have anything at all. So queen f6, king e3. I give him another check. And again, I'm running like super low on time. Like I think I'm down to 20 seconds at this point, and I just totally blunder rook g4. I was trying to obviously take this pawn to try to attack further, but this obviously just hangs the rook. So he takes my rook, and I was just like, ah. So inevitably, I did lose anyway, without even. So I lost without even trying to go for checkmate. And I got like the worst of both worlds, where I tried to play an endgame and lost anyway, but then I should have went all in and tried to go for checkmate. So I lost. I resigned here, but I was gonna lose on time because I had 20 seconds, and converting this position with 20 seconds or 40 seconds at that point, that looks way too difficult. Like my instinct would probably just be like rook g2 here, take, try to gobble, but again, I just don't have time. He still had like 3 minutes on the clock somehow. So yeah, pretty unlucky I would win that. Going into the second game against Dwayne, I finally have the white pieces, and I get to continue practicing my attempt at a Catalan. So we go d4, and he goes straight into a modern with g6. I autopiloted knight f3. I remembered after I played knight f3, I'm like, wait, he's playing a modern. I have something against the modern. I have the 150 attack that I sort of know how to play. So I was like, oh, I should have played into the 150, but whatever. I can learn how to play against a King's Indian style setup through a d4 lens, I guess. And then he played e6, which I know is not the typical move in these kinds of openings. Generally, if you're going to push g6, you want to push d6. But all right, he played e6, castles, and then he played d5. So now we're going into a little more normal-ish territory, I guess. I guess more into a pawn structure that I'm familiar with in normal Catalan lines. I continue with e3. I totally forgot my notes as my voice cracks right there. I totally forgot my notes against playing against King's Indian style or fianchetto styled setups. What the book recommends is fianchettoing the other bishop and then trying to counteract their bishop and get play over here in the center with the two bishops. Totally forgot that until like much later in the game, but by that point it was too late. And I played e3 again because I just don't know how to defend the d4 pawn well enough, or if I'm even supposed to defend the d4 pawn. That's just something that it's something I will need to look into more. The two big questions I am struggling to really understand in the Catalan is, how do I defend my d4 pawn if I am even supposed to at all? And what do I do with this bishop? Because I find that a lot of times when I try to go for bishop f4, they just try to trade it off or play something where it threatens my bishop. And, anyway. Knight e7, I finally play c4, so this is your very normal Catalan structure here with these pawns, fianchetto light squared bishop, knight on f3. He castles, I go with knight c3, and, I started to think that for some reason that this was going to be the way to go, but it's not. I try to clarify the center because at this point I'm just totally on my own. I don't know what I'm doing. I know I want to push e4, but everything just seemed like it wasn't quite in the right spot. So bishop f5, I go for knight h4. Again, kind of like in the game against Emmanuel, this is what I was looking for, where I'm trying to trade this off and not blunder a knight, or I guess blunder a pawn in this case. So he goes back to e6. And I played b3. This is the point where I remembered, oh, right, against King's Indian style setups, I wanted to fianchetto the dark bishop. So I was like, shit, I guess I'll do it now, whatever. He plays g4, which kind of caught me off guard because it looks like a weak pawn now. So I just went back to f3. He plays h6. I fianchetto the other bishop. He brings his bishop back to f5, so I'm a little annoyed, but okay. Now I figured, okay, I can actually push e4. I have enough defenders on it, right? 2 defenders, 2 attackers, it's totally fine. He takes, I take, and then he plays knight d5. For some reason, I played bishop c1, which, you know, not a good move. You can just take here and play knight c3 and fork. Oops, and fork, which we both missed in the game, admittedly. But for some reason, I thought I had a sacrifice here and was trying to like look at all this crazy nonsense here. You know, the more natural move here is rook c1. Like, it just makes so much sense. And it's one of the best moves, but for some reason I was like, ooh, me attack. Nah. Yeah, so he plays g4. And this is kind of going back to a point I made a while ago where it's like, sometimes I think I have an attack and I'm supposed to attack, but I just don't have one. So I just need to play a little more patiently. This is one of those moments where it's happening again. And I don't remember that I need to do that. So g4, knight h4, bishop back to e6 again, and now knight c5. So obviously I'm attacking the c7 pawn, and he needs to defend it. Bishop c8 looks ugly, so I can understand why he played queen c8. I totally did not understand why this was so strong, and I'll show you the computer moves here, which I would have never seen. Like, maybe if you gave me like 20 minutes I could see it, but I would not have seen this at all. So the computer says bishop takes h6, you sack your bishop, then you sack your rook, and they take back with the pawn. You sack your rook, you sack your bishop, so that you can attack here. Bishop g7, knight e6, queen d7, and apparently you can take here. This is +5, and it does look like I have an attack, but I never would have considered sacking a bishop and then sacking my rook. I win my bishop back, to be fair, so this is more like a rook sacrifice, but this just, I never would have seen it, and if you showed it to me, I would have been skeptical. I didn't see anything concrete here, so I was like, I mean, right now I don't see anything totally concrete, so I'm like, So going back to the game, I took his, oops, that's the analysis. So I did take his bishop. It was kind of causing problems for me the entire game. He takes back, I take his knight, and then he takes back on d5. So now I'm thinking, okay, now his king looks mildly more exposed, but it's not so obvious how I can exploit that. I just start with bishop f4. I'm getting my bishop off of the starting square finally after 22 moves. He plays rook f7. I play queen d3. One of my ideas is to try to bring my knight in over here and maybe get something going on with this. So he plays rook f6 to try to counteract that, but then I try to attack the rook. Maybe I'm going to trade his dark squared bishop off, and I mean, this endgame is fine. It's like equal probably, but okay. He takes with the knight, and then I take back with the d pawn. He plays rook e6, and I take the free pawn that's on d5. Again, if it's free, it's for me, but this isn't like totally losing on the extent that you're down a pawn. Obviously, computer evaluation will always say whatever it wants to say, but it's not always so obvious why advantages are the way they are. c6 to kick my queen away, and I've just played queen e4 pretty quickly just to continue defending the pawn, right? There's 2 attackers on the pawn. Oops, I need to stop doing that. He plays h5, which I didn't really know. I guess he was trying to defend this pawn. But if I But it's like if I take this pawn, he can take my pawn, and then we queen trade. There's a rook trade, and it's pretty much feels like a draw. He's got a 3-on-2. I guess it would be a 3-on-1, but maybe it would have been a game. So h5, knight f5. He takes my pawn on e5, which I can understand why he did it, right? I don't really want to trade rook and bishop for my queen. I have more pieces on the board, but I didn't really want to give away my queen. A queen is easier to play with, even though it may not theoretically be as strong as two pieces of equal value. But he missed the tactic after he takes here, which is I can take the rook anyway, and you can't take my queen back. And you can pause the video here if you really want to figure out the tactic here. So bishop e5, and I saw a few moves before. I have this fork, knight e7, forking king and queen. He plays king f7. I take, and then he takes my rook, which admittedly I didn't see this part. Funnily enough, I thought I was just going to be up a rook. And even if I didn't have this rook here, like if it was up here for whatever reason, it would still be relatively equal. It's like rook and minor piece. And it's a 3-on-2 versus a 3-on-2. But I did have this in-between move, knight d6. He can't even come closer to try to attack my knight because my rook is covering that. So he plays king g6. Now I can take his bishop. And my knight is a little loose, so I might have to dance around with it for a while, but I'll eventually be able to consolidate. So I take his bishop. He plays a5 because the pawn was hanging. I play rook e1 just to get my king towards this, or my rook towards the center. King f6. I give him a check. He moves away. I bring my king forward. I want to push this pawn to try to break apart this 3-on-2 and get a pass pawn, and I imagine he wanted to do the same on this side. He plays rook e8, and I totally didn't realize that my rook would be hanging if my knight moves, so I almost messed up there. But I am continuing with what I had in my mind to begin with, which was f3. He tries to play king f5 to kind of hold everything. I do end up taking on g4 before I realized that I had a tactic here, which was knight d6 check. It's a fork. And from here, I was just going to win the game. So he resigned here, and I won't say finally, but I do win this game against Wayne. If I feel like I'm on the other end of what was happening on the Saturday after Blitz, where I was losing just one tactic in the end game. I feel like I'm the one that's seeing the tactics now, and it was a nice way to win, So going back to, this was like probably the critical moment where he blundered. So here he blundered because of this tactic, and then I sealed it with. Well, the capture here wasn't necessary. I totally could have just went with knight d6 right away, and this would have been game over. So, like, for example, here, take. I don't know. What are you going to do here now? Okay, going into the last league game of the night, he did want to play black again, so, who am I to say no? I did play white, so here we go. Again, d4, just trying to get more practice. He opens the same way with g6, and I mentioned in the last game that against this, I have something prepared, which is the 150 attack. And when you played it again, I took a second. I'm like, right, I can go into it, or I could play the Catalan again. Let me go into the 150. So I played e4, right? And just as a side note for anyone unaware, generally speaking, when people play d4, they do want to play c4 and control a little bit more towards the queen side. Whereas if you're an e4 player, you would, obviously you would start with e4, and then you would play d4 to grab the center like this. someone can probably explain better why that's really the case, but from what I understand, going into d4, you want to play c4 to contest more of the center without getting counterattacked and trading central pawns. So I played e4, kind of going into like more of my e4 sided brain, for lack of better phrasing. He goes into the modern. I play knight c3. So I'm basically preparing the attack. D6, which is what I am more used to seeing. Bishop e3. Knight d7's a good move. It is a common move in the modern where you're kind of preparing one of the pawn breaks, e5 or c5. I go queen d2, and in the 150, queen d2 is like the true indication of a 150 attack. Like, this is the sign, or this is the move where it's like, yes, I am trying to attack you. What are you going to do about it? And from what I understand, the way to go about this is to immediately play a6 b5, and try to say, look, yeah, you're going to attack me here. And white, it looks like you want to castle queenside. If you're going to do that, I'm going to attack you. So that's my knowledge of the opening. But then he plays e5, which I thought was a little premature. You know, I have the option of taking. Like, I don't have to close the center. Most King's Indian player, or most people when white playing against the King's Indian, they want to close the center and say like, oh, I have more space. On the flip side, the King's Indian player wants that, right? They want d5 so that they can play f5 and try to push all their pawns and do a kingside attack. So I kind of say, you know, I'm not giving you this closed position. I'm going to take on e5. He takes back with the bishop, and, you know, his king is slightly exposed. Let me get my king out of the center first, so long castle, and I can probably get something going because my pieces are ever so slightly more active. This bishop is a target. It's hard for you to, like, you can still castle, of course, but it's going to take a little more time than you think, right? Because you want to move your bishop back before you bring your knight here. Bringing your knight to e7's a little too passive. Like, you're not really contesting anything in the center. So I figured I should start having an initiative really soon. But he plays knight b6, which he told me after the game he did want to prepare a queenside attack. But this just wasn't the way to do it. You need to just push the pawns immediately and then get the knight behind it. So he goes for knight b6, and I immediately start getting my initiative going with f4. I saw this move a while ago, and it's pretty logical. I can push these pawns pretty freely since there's no king behind them. And, you know, he's going to move back, and I'll get more tempo. I can break the center. So I figure, okay, things are going to be fine. So bishop g7, as I expected. And you can see he's still 2 moves away before being fully safe, so I need to act pretty quickly. I start with knight f3. I know it's a good move, and I still have time to kind of punish black for not being castled and not having his king safe. He goes knight e7. Again, a little passive. I guess he didn't want his knight to be the target of an attack if I were to push, maybe. But yeah, so he goes knight e7. And admittedly, I should have probably just pushed e5 immediately, although the computer says h3 is, it's time to play h3. But yeah, the point of bishop d3 in my mind was, if you do castle, I'm going to play f5. And, I mean, you're not going to take with a piece because my pawn is going to take back. You probably aren't going to take this way just because it looks like you're weakening your own king. But let's just say, you know, my plan was always to try to break apart your pawns, and then I'm going to start pushing h4, h5. I can bring my other rook over, and I should have a pretty good attack here. He plays knight c6, which I thought was a bold move, because you're not getting your king to safety yet. And look, like all my pieces are out here. I have a nice little queen battery going on here. My rook's going to be in the center to just like wreck apart your position if you don't get your king to safety. So, you know, he played knight c6, I played e5, which apparently wasn't the best way to play. But it made sense to me. I'm trying to open the center, your king isn't castled, and all my pieces are quite active. To my surprise, well, a bit of a surprise, he did take, and I figured, okay, I'll trade. This is kind of what I want. I'm creating a lot of problems with all my pieces in the center. And you can see, even though the material is equal, right, we both have 2 pawns. We both have lost 2 pawns. It's +1, so I definitely have a strong initiative. He takes my pawn with the knight, which, you know, obviously the computer is saying this is the beginning of really big problems. And I definitely saw why. So I take, and he takes. Again, he's really pushing it with keeping his king in the center. I decide to play bishop h6 because, so I did see this check, but I didn't see a follow-up after. Oh, right, no, I did see this. Queen d8. I saw queen d8. I saw this check, but I figured he can block here, and I didn't really see a way forward afterwards. So I started with bishop h6. Now his king is stuck in the center. You can't bring your bishop back to g7 because it's not defended. And it's really hard to find shelter for the king now. It's not the best move, but intuitively I felt this made a lot of sense. And this is going to, you know, get even worse for black. Bishop e6 makes some sense, right? You're trying to like cover up your king since it can't really move towards the king side. Maybe you might be able to castle queen side in like a move or two. But I just bring my rook to the center. I'm attacking his bishop. He plays bishop d6, which again looks pretty logical because you're cutting off all the lines that are pointing towards the king. And, you know, given 2 moves, you'll be able to be safe on the queen side. So I was like, okay, that makes sense. But it's not so simple. I finally give him this check. I figured he's going to play c6, and, you know, I should have something there. I might be able to sack, and this bishop becomes loose, and it's not so clear how to really defend yourself. Even if you do castle, I now have an open c file that I could abuse. Maybe if I get rid of this bishop, this diagonal becomes a problem. Or sorry, this diagonal becomes a problem, and even this diagonal, right? Because this is like the next best place for the king to be if the c pawn kind of comes up and gets traded off or whatever. And of course, if b takes c6, so if something like this, it's like your position really is like Swiss cheese, right? So, so I give him a check, and I guess he didn't want to play c6 because of everything I just described. So he played king e7. And here I was looking at it, I was calculating for a while, and I saw, so the first thing I saw was bishop g5, f6, and I didn't really see a way forward here, right? Obviously, there's a chance to skewer the king and the queen, but this pawn is in the way, so it doesn't quite work. So I was like, okay, is there a way I can get rid of this pawn or prevent f6 from happening in general? And that's when I found the move that I played in the game. And I did my Gotham chess impression in my head, the rook, and I sacrificed my rook for a bishop, so it's not too crazy of a sacrifice. But, you know, I saw that, you know, if he's going to take here, I get to win his queen. So I'm like, okay, great. And if he takes with the king, which is actually what he did in the game, I just thought this just can't look right. This doesn't look right at all. Like, there's got to be like a mate here. And I know I said that in the first game against him, But this time out around, I was like, with the king in the center with no pieces around it, I figured this has to be like just over. So I was looking at a lot of different moves. I was looking at I did look at rook e1. I looked at queen e3. I was looking at like maybe bringing my bishop back. I mean, obviously that doesn't work, but I was looking at a lot of different checks, like maybe this one or this one or this one. Should I go forward maybe? Okay, not to d5, but maybe like I can go forward to cut him off and then come over. I eventually settled with queen e3, which wasn't actually the best move, but this just gets worse and worse from here. You have no way to cover your king except for bishop e5, to which I would just take your queen and probably just play something like queen f or bishop f4, and like this looks pretty bad. Yeah, you have to play f6 again, but I figured there's something here to convert the game. I figured there was something here. I just didn't see it all the way through, but I figured he didn't really want to play this. But you kind of have to at this point. This game looks really bad at this point. The move he did play was king f5, and I looked at it, I'm like, rook f1. I was like, wait, this is actually over, right? I'm like, so I saw, so it is mate in 2 here, as you can see. I saw rook f1, king g4, and then just, I saw queen f3, but I'm sure there are other moves that just checkmate. So I played rook f1, only move. I guess he has 2 moves, bishop f4, but that doesn't really help anything. So I saw this. Queen h3 is actually mate. Queen f3. He still has this square. So okay. Oh, not that one. This would be mate. So I get a nice little win against Wayne in this game here. Nice little 150 attack where it definitely felt like he wasn't really getting his king to safety fast enough. I felt like the biggest problem. If he castled here, like, it's still a game. My pieces are more active, but there's nothing. I didn't see anything concrete if he were to castle right here. But this whole trade really, I felt like intuitively like this is just really bad for black. But yeah, 19 moves. Or sorry, 21 moves. No, he resigned here. So 19 moves. Pretty good game. For me, I think he misplayed the opening in the sense that he didn't get his king to safety, and that kind of caused his downfall. But those are the games. I'm not gonna really be too concerned about the leaderboard aspect of it, like the rating and everything. I might check on it every so often, but yeah, this month or maybe at least the next like week or two, I'm just gonna really focus on trying to learn these new openings. I may not actually go into like Knights Tango games where as black, right? I might not actually try to learn this because I have to deal with so many other lines against knight on the second move is white, like bishop f4. Like, what if they play a London? What if they play knight f3 like Emmanuel did? Knight c3 is a move. I'm sure this is a move too, just g3. So there's a lot to learn if I wanted to try to get a position like this. So I may take back what I said about learning the tango, but we'll see. I'll definitely like play games online and see how I feel against some of these openings that don't involve 2 c4. But overall, 4 wins, 1 loss. And the game that I lost, I was winning. I just didn't have time. So a little unfortunate, but that's just how it is sometimes. But yeah, thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.